Hello, and welcome to Forbes Newsroom. Today we're joined by Matt Dureau, a reporter on our wealth team who has been covering all the billionaires involved in the Twitter deal with Elon Musk. Matt, welcome. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Maggie.
All right, so I think most people have been following this news story because we are all extremely online. However, let's say we have a viewer who happens to have been on vacation and offline for the past week. Can you give a 30-second wrap-up of what's been going on with Twitter and Elon Musk?
Sure. Count me among those who was on vacation last week, so it was crazy. But yeah, nearly half a year after Elon Musk and Twitter agreed to his $44 billion takeover of the social media company, the deal finally closed after trading on Thursday, wrapping up a crazy 6 months or so where Musk did his best to get out of the deal, but was ultimately, forced after Twitter sued to follow through.
So he paid $44 billion. You are on our wealth team. What does this mean for Elon Musk's net worth?
Sure. So back in May, Elon went around looking for co-investors and was able to find a group that included some big names like Larry Ellison and Prince Al from Saudi Arabia, who collectively said that they would put forth $7.1 billion of that 44 million piece. So Musk didn't have to pay the 44 million himself, though he paid most of it. Jack Dorsey also rolled forward about $1 billion, representing his existing stake, also reducing Musk's portion of the purchase price. But still, when Elon agreed to pay $54.20 per share or $44 billion back in April or May, it was obviously a much brighter outlook for tech markets and social media companies in general. So the value of the company that he and his co-investors acquired for $44 billion is now worth a lot less than that, likely. For reference, a pretty widely tracked social media index is down about 40% since that date. So we figure, the $44 billion company he bought is probably worth about that much less.
That's a significant discount. And I think in the early days of Musk's ownership and taking this company private, we see the way he is, I would say, openly brainstorming ways to make more money for the company. Over the weekend, it was reported that he was considering making users pay $20 a month for their blue verified checks. But you and your team just reported a new figure there. What are you finding?
Yeah, like you said, Maggie, it really appears to be happening in real time. He threw that $20 figure out there, seemingly offhand, like he often does on Twitter. And Stephen King, the horror author, tweeted back pretty outraged at the prospect. So Musk said, "How about 8?" And then followed up basically with a definitive tweet, making it look like it's going to be $8 a month. And obviously, one of the, that $44 billion price tag, one of the most expensive acquisitions in tech history, even with all the money Elon himself, as the world's richest man, had on hand and the investments he was able to get from co-investors, they still needed to take on about $13 billion of debt to finance the acquisition, which analysts widely believe will result in about $1 billion of new interest expense for the company, which already had pretty, shaky finances to begin with and not a lot of wiggle room to cover debt of that nature. So obviously they're looking for ways to cover that debt. And we, asked around, and it seems like that $8 per month fee that they'd be charging for account verification is likely to be just a very small piece of that.
How else might they compensate? Have you heard? And what can users expect?
Analysts, we're sure to point out, as I indicated, that this is in fact, one of the many initiatives that Elon will be implementing, and they do see a lot of potential in areas like charging corporations and governments who might in fact be willing to pay a lot more than individual users who have, mostly seem to be against the idea. Back in May, around the time the acquisition was originally agreed upon, a pitch deck for the for the acquisition to minority investors actually leaked to the New York Times, and Elon laid out some pretty lofty ambitions in there, growing subscription revenue to $10 billion, which is about twice as much as Twitter makes as a whole right now, basically, with none of that coming from subscriptions. And it seemed that he envisioned their existing Twitter Blue premium program, which users do pay about $4.99 for currently to do things like undo tweet, and others obviously wouldn't pay $4.99 for undo tweet, but you saw that being a big piece of where the $10 billion will come from, and also from this mysteriously named service called X, which I think is widely believed to be something similar to WeChat. So all that to say, there isn't a lot of certainty at this point. There's a lot of questions left to be answered.
There's a lot of speculation. There's a lot of people like Stephen King who are tweeting about it and expressing a lot of emotions. But I want to go back to something that you started talking about, which is the other investors, the other shareholders in this company now. You mentioned two really important names, the first of which is Prince Alwaleed. He is the nephew of the king of Saudi Arabia. Is that correct?
That is correct, yeah.
How much of Twitter does he own? Where does he count among its shareholders?
Prior to this deal, his stake in the public company was not large enough to appear in the SEC filings. So the fact that he and his publicly traded holding company, Kingdom Holdings, which he controls basically all of, owned Twitter at all, really surfaced as a result of this deal. And after the deal went through, based on the amount that he and his holding company contributed, we figure he owns about 4% of the new privately held company.
So that's about $1.9 billion?
That's correct, yeah.
Put this into context. What does this mean? And should users and regular Americans care that this prince is one of Twitter's largest shareholders?
I think it means a couple things. It's definitely spooked some who spend a lot of their time thinking about national security. A Democratic senator from the state of Connecticut tweeted when this news came out, asking the government committee that reviews investments by foreigners to basically take a look at the acquisition, specifically because of Alwaleed's and other Middle Eastern investments in Twitter, and what that might say for the platform. I think it also is a huge vote of confidence for Musk, frankly, with all the talk of this having been maybe a case where he overpaid more than anyone, potentially in the history of tech acquisitions, given how much the markets have slumped since he bought it. The fact that Alwaleed is willing to roll forward a stake that was once worth $2.9 billion, an amount he could have gotten in cash if he just walked away. The fact that he's willing to stay on and hold a stake probably worth, a little more than half of that at this point, says to me that he really believes in Elon's turnaround plans.
And where does Twitter co-founder and now former CEO Jack Dorsey fit in all of this? You did mention his name a little bit earlier.
That's another huge vote of confidence that Musk got in the last few days. When those equity investors, including Alwaleed and Dorsey, committed back in May to provide, nearly $8 billion of financing towards the deal. While they did commit that to Musk, they weren't legally obligated to Twitter to follow through with those commitments. And, with, the company looking so much less valuable at this point in time, you can see why they might want to walk away. But Dorsey, like Alwaleed, did end up making good on his commitment. So he will stay on as one of the private Twitter's largest investors. And it'll be interesting to see if they even bring him back, or if he, ends up with some sort of role back at the company he co-founded.
Matt, thanks so much for breaking down what we know now.
Sure. Thank you, Maggie.